Okay, Leanne Caron, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Always a pleasure.
Uh, there's so much to cover. I guess we'll start with downtown. At Committee of the Whole, as we're recording this on Wednesday. It was yesterday, Committee of the Whole. Um, I guess I'll start with the whole. It's a weird confluence of things because we're talking about the 200th anniversary of Guelph. We're talking about taking up old Guelph and downtown to the point where it's kind of going to be difficult to navigate for a year and a half. And then we throw into this thing we're gonna try and host the Memorial Cup that year too in 2027. Is this not the epitome of doing too much at one time?
It is, and I did raise that during the meeting that I have concerns that if we want the Memorial Cup, we want it to be successful. And success isn't inviting thousands of people to a downtown that is completely ripped up and in the middle of construction. So it won't bode well for our reputation as a welcoming city. I question as well the number of hotel rooms we have, and whether the ROI for the investment is going to stay in Guelph if more than half of the hotel rooms are outside of the city. The other concern I have, of course, is that the MAT tax, the municipal accommodation tax, this would completely wipe it out until the year 2030. And I do think that there's other events, activities, and organizations who may want to host significant events in our city that may have a better return on investment and will also want a portion of the MAT tax to be able to access for their events. So it did pass, and we haven't won the bid, but it does commit us to some significant funding if
Right.
we are successful.
Right. We're not funding anything yet. Key to point out.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, I should go on record as saying I'm not anti-hockey. That that gets out there that I'm opposed to the Memorial Cup because I don't like hockey. That is just not the case. It is this is about a whole lot of other layers of consideration that have to be
I
taken
made
into.
that note in my notes here, not
Thank
anti-hockey,
you.
and
Thank you.
underlined it. Um, the other piece of this too is I feel like, and this could just be my feeling, that um, the Memorial Cup or putting in a bid and hopefully succeeding at getting the Memorial Cup is a quick, cheap, easy way of doing something big for the 200th that has so far, at least from public appearances, not come to fruition. And I think this is something that is increasingly concerned to a lot of people that it feels like almost a year and a half out from the 200th anniversary of Guelph. Like people aren't seeing the countdown yet. Like I'm not that I'm envisioning like an actual countdown clock somewhere, but it
Mhm.
just feels like it's something that isn't on the radar. At least people aren't seeing it on its radar.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been raising the alarm since probably 2020 because it takes a decade to start planning this. In 1927, they were planning events a decade out, and it was a huge event. It brought in thousands and thousands of people in a city that only had a few thousand people. There were parades and there was merch, and I don't think we've ever seen a civic event like 1927. Maybe the 150th in 1977 would have been where most Guelphites were around and might even remember, and that was a big deal too.
And that merch still turns up to great
It
fanfare.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think there's a couple of factors. I mean, first we've got a lot of financial issues that we need to have affordability issues that we're focused on. And so a big civic celebration doesn't align when people are living unhoused and employment and we have so much infrastructure work to do. At the same time, I see civic celebrations as investments in identity and investments in tourism, and that they bring a lot of value to the city. I think the second and probably most the layer that we're not talking about is that celebrating a bicentennial of a founding is a very colonial
mm,
event. And in a time of Indigenous reconciliation, we need to be sensitive to our heritage, but also to our treaty obligations and reconciliation. To that, I respond that John Galt um, is worthy of celebrating.
Mm,
Um, Perhaps colonialism is not, but John Galt was a different kind of individual, and as you know have heard me talk often, was a Scottish novelist, but he was a very good personal friend of Tyen Danega, also known as Joseph Brant, and his son John Brant. And there he was actually a treaty representative for the Six Nations. They asked him to be their representative to the crown, and he was very pro-Indigenous rights and not your typical founding colonizer. So I do think Guelph does things differently in that respect, and that our founding stories very different. But Adam, the other thing is that if we want to talk about reconciliation, this is the perfect opportunity.
mm.
We talk about it, we bring it out into the open, we make sure that our Indigenous community members are part of any event that we have. If we don't want to call it a celebration, let's not call it a celebration. Let's talk about it as if it's a reconciliation event and focus on that, but still do something. We can't let the bicentennial just pass and not use it for a positive purpose and outcome.
I think that's fair. I think the void of conversation, a vacuum of conversation is sort of creating both a lack of expectation and sort of greater expectation. Like we have to do something because it looks like nothing's being done. And then the flip side of this, well, nothing's being done, so maybe we don't have to do anything. But given the challenges you're talking about, not just the cultural ones, but the financial ones, and saying like, is it right to have like big parties while, so many people in our community are struggling for housing and struggling to afford to pay the bills? Couldn't the city come out and just say, you know what? Given all these, factums, these touch points, we're just not going to do a huge thing. We're not going to turn. We're not going to shut down the center of town and have a huge party and just say like we're going to mark this in an entirely different way that's not, you know, chest thumping and maybe we'll put up some crepe paper on the street lamps, but we're not going to do this like millions of dollars of things.
Well, if that's the decision, and we're less than 2 years from our founding date of April 23rd, then let's say so. But I do
Right.
know, on a positive note, a working group has been formed. Committee members have been identified and invited to participate. Planning is underway. It's not just a City of Guelph corporate event. It is a true community opportunity. So there are lots of nonprofit groups, businesses who are starting to plan for the bicentennial and what they're going to do that year. I do think that it's more than just the city that needs to organize this event and celebration. So I encourage even the university and the chamber and businesses and nonprofits and the historical society and Council of Canadians and all kinds of organizations to start thinking about how we can celebrate this event. When it comes to funding, um, yes, the city absolutely needs to put more in the pot. Absolutely, because that's collecting taxes and redistributing it for good, public good, is what we do. That's the definition of government. I do think that there's a lot of public good for all citizens, and that those who are living with homelessness and those who are living with food insecurity, this is for them too. In fact, I think I've told you this story before, but one of my aha moments in my role as a municipal leader was when we were doing movie nights in Market Square. We set
Mm.
up a big projection screen, and I went down there, and we were doing The Wizard of Oz. And I was sitting at the very back on one of those benches, and sitting behind me, well, beside me and behind me was a man who was living with homelessness. He had his belongings with him, so it was obvious to me he was struggling, um, and some mental health challenges. And he was elderly, I'd say in his 60s, and we were watching Wizard of Oz together. And there was this scene where Dorothy and Toto are running, and he's crying. He was viscerally emotional. And I turned to him and I said, are you okay? Even I'm getting teary-eyed now, and it was years ago. And he said, I'm fine, I'm fine. This is my favorite movie. I haven't seen it in decades.
Mm.
And that to me clicked because he was invited there. He was welcome there. These civic events, these true free public events where we are celebrating, everyone belongs. And we're
Mm.
all there together. There were families with children. There were seniors sitting in their camping chairs. There were young couples on their first date. That was obvious in some situations. You know, the tenuous holding of the hands and touching of the shoulder. You thought you're on a first date. Um, and the home and those living with homelessness. We're all there in one civic space, and that's what I see the bicentennial as. This isn't just for those who can pay. This is for everyone equally.
Hmm. I can't watch The Wizard of Oz without thinking about all the urban legends around it, but that's just me. I want to address one more downtown thing before we move on, which
Okay.
is I know that the mayor talked about, and this was something that delegates talked about too with the redesign of St. George's Square about the wow factor. And I mean, as nebulous as a term as the wow factor is, it could mean just about anything. I think what concerns me is that we've put an expectation on the city to create culture. And I do wonder, as something of a cultural critic myself, how much the the state, the government can create culture. Is that not something the community creates? And then putting it on city council and saying you have to create culture, is that not kind of outside of your brief as a city council? And should that be something you should be expecting of city staff? Create something cultural because that's something the community decides is relevant.
100%. Absolutely. I mean, when I see the wow factor, I think of just something like we need more trees and more benches and more public use infrastructure. What that looks like and how our civic identity rises and expresses itself is very diverse. I mean, I can only speak from my demographic, but we have a very multicultural city. We should absolutely honor our Indigenous heritage in how we use public art and use space. All of that will rise, I think, from the community consultation. So no, I don't expect that city staff are going to say, you know what, our identity is the crown. We need a crown. Our
Mm,
identity is the Canada Goose. We need a Canada Goose. Or I don't think that coming up with iconic symbols of our civic identity is a staff decision, but community consultation will make it easier for staff to, they're the ones that have to order, right? They're the ones that
mm,
have to put in the product and do the design work and make it happen. Thankfully, our planning staff I think, are incredibly talented in public engagement. Sometimes their hands are tied. Their hands are tied by
right.
council. Their hands are tied by the province, who pass bills that take away their planning authority, and they can't do their jobs effectively. But I do know they want to. I talk to planning staff, and they are just itching to do good stuff. And I trust that they will reach out to the community to make that happen.
Uh, True or false? That old crown, it's buried somewhere under Eastview Park, the old landfill, right?
They're a little, yes, but they're a little bits and pieces of salvage
Ah,
still around above ground. But it corroded beyond. I know it's kind of like the Carnegie Library that people really lament that loss in a really emotional way, but it couldn't be salvaged. It was too far gone.
I just want to make sure people don't understand it's like in a Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse somewhere with all the other, you know, priceless artifacts.
We do have a
Um,
warehouse. We
yeah.
do have a place where old relics go to die.
I mean, I know yeah, that there was supposed to be a report coming back about that, right? Linda Busuttil asked for like, can we get an accounting of where all our Raiders of the Lost Ark artifacts are?
Well, yeah, but one of them was the old clock. There was a
Yeah.
clock tower on City Hall. Yeah, there's pieces of it still remaining in that same secret warehouse. And the
We
report,
should stop saying secret warehouse.
what can we salvage? Well, it all came up when the City Hall bell ended up being repatriated. It was sitting for decades and nothing was being done with it. It ended up being installed, as you know, in the courtyard at City Hall. I had lots of feelings about that because it's not publicly accessible. I think it should have been an outdoor installation, but that's passed, and at least it's out in the sunlight now.
Yeah,
Uh, Better there than in a warehouse. But it started a discussion about where is our cultural heritage? Where are our iconic pieces of public art? Why are they sitting in a building when we could be repatriating them to the public realm? So
right.
I think the clock, having a town clock seems like a very civic-minded project that could happen during the bicentennial.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. I want to move on to other things though. I mean, the big thing and the nominations closed on Monday. Something like 27 people have
Mm.
submitted their names to fill the vacant Ward 6 seat. Let me just begin by phrasing it this way. What are your sort of considerations when you're thinking about who best to fill that seat and when you're going to be listening to 27
Mm.
speeches in a couple of weeks?
That's a tough one. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because some of the candidates have reached out to members of council, not just me, just asking questions about the job. How much time does it take? What do you think the priorities of the city are? That kind of thing. And I'm always happy to help anyone who's interested in municipal government. If they want to run for election, I've been part of the campaign school in the past. It's something that I feel should be more accessible to everyone. And so this is going to be an interesting process that we've never had before. The last time we had a vacancy, it was a quick appointment. The second place candidate in Ward 1, who lost by one vote,
Right?
was appointed, and that was a very quick decision. This is going to be much more complex. So here's the three factors that I think are important to me. Number one, we only have 1 year left in
Hmm.
our term. And so it takes a year to truly onboard into the role of a councillor, just to understand the municipal pieces of legislation, how the city works, how to handle constituency issues. All of those things take at least a year of onboarding. So someone who is familiar with municipal government doesn't have to be someone who has held a role before, but someone who understands board of directors, governance, all of the pieces of legislation, Municipal Act, Planning Act, all the pieces of legislation that govern what we do. Someone who understands budgeting, someone who can hit the ground running with the skills needed that will shorten the onboarding period. So again, it doesn't have to be someone who's filled that role before, but someone who is adjacent to that. The second is I would prefer someone who isn't going to run in 2026. And the reason I say that is that um, whether we like it or not, there is a factor in incumbency that advantages someone. So I don't think it's right that council chooses someone who will then have an incumbency factor. And because I think that puts us in a position where we're actually not rigging the election, but we're influencing the
Mm.
election.
Hmm.
The third thing is that they need to understand and have a link with the community. And I know that, I refer to that as social capital, that they're embedded in the community. It doesn't have to be Ward 6. We have other councillors who don't live in the ward that they represent on council. But you have to have some kind of profile in the community where you're part of a group or neighborhood or school council or a service club or something where you have that social capital that you have the ability to network and truly represent your constituents over the next year. So
Hmm.
I'm not interested in what your politics are. We have a very diverse council ranging everywhere, right, left, and everything in between. I consider most of us are somewhere in between. And so it doesn't really matter in that range where you fall. Um, I think what's most important is you can hit the ground running to do the job.
Okay. The flip side of that too is the onus on council to use a process that doesn't get a lot of um, practical experience, let's say. And I know that
Yeah.
from conversations with other of your colleagues, there's, I mean, not concerns about how well they'll be able to follow that 10-page vacancy bylaw, but just
Yeah.
that, looking at how that is going to be put into practical use as opposed to just having something written on a page just in case, that then there are some concerns about, what that's going to look like in practice.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is a very rare occurrence where we have to do this. It's a lot of responsibility. I don't actually relish it. I would prefer, if it had been practical, that we just run a full election. But to run a full campaign for a potential candidate, there's money that has to be outlaid by that candidate. There has to be a significant election period where they can truly have an opportunity to hit the doors, go to campaign events so that the people of six can have informed votes. I That was just an impractical solution for a 1 year term.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that we've had to go this route. We have, as you said, we have a 10-page document about how democracy works in Guelph. This is one of the
Mm.
options. We had multiple options. This is one of the options, and I think it's the most expedient given the length of term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, as we're kind of tiptoeing around, there is an election next year. You have been on council. By the time next year rolls around, you'll have been on council for 20 years. What are you thinking about re-election wise? It's okay. We all know.
Yeah. Um, I never make that decision too far in advance because life changes very quickly. Um, I think what's important to me when I do make that decision is that the residents of Ward 5 have been very supportive of me over the past 20 years. Um, the issues in Ward 5 are intensifying with growth and new housing, expansion of the university, business. We're still in a post-COVID recovery in some ways. Roads and infrastructures. The new library is being built. I want to be here for that. I want to be here for the bicentennial. So there's things that I still feel a calling to address in city building. And if there's another candidate who, espouses those same values and same passions that I have for our city, I'd be happy to support an up and coming candidate. I've always said to any candidate who is interested in running in Ward 5, give me a call. So we'll make that decision when the next year when nominations open. But I
Mm.
still have, if I'm being subtle, there's still things I would like to accomplish. Still things that residents of Ward 5 in the city um, would like to see happen, and I want to be there for that.
Fair enough. Very, very quickly. I mean, we're in summer. Some of us on this call are in vacation mode already. I'm curious though, when we're thinking about fall and the stuff that's left to do this year, what are you thinking about?
Well, we still have budget pressures. Affordability and housing are always going to be at the top of our lens for the next, you know, foreseeable future. At the same time, you probably all our conversations in the past, I look at ROI as in when we spend something in the budget, what does that investment leverage? So there are things we need to invest in, like civic and community and social services that actually save us money in the long run. I'm always thinking long term, what's not what's going to pay off in 4 years, but what's going to pay off in the long term. The other big thing for me this fall, and I know I've been very vocal about it, is the impact of provincial legislation on municipal government. And I have huge red flags about the impact of Bill 5 and Bill 17. The province seems to be framing this is about economic growth in the Ring of Fire and minerals and mining. No, this is about the green belt. This is about our GID. This is about IMICO. This is about um, um, some of our lands within the city of Guelph. This could very easily turn on the city of Guelph if Bill 5 continues to, ramrod through the province of Ontario. It also sends a significant message about the role of the public and the role of the community in land use planning. It is removing land use planning authority from municipal governments, which has been embedded in the Municipal Act and the Planning Act for a century. And it is a backwards step towards the intergovernmental level of jurisdiction. So my focus in the fall is very much going to be building a strong city so that we can tackle the changes that the provincial government has imposed upon us against our will.
And most importantly, Guelph artifact disclosure. I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I'm kidding. Leanne Caron, thank you so much for taking some time out in cottage country and talking to us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Looking forward to next time because there's always way too much to talk about whenever we get together.
This is true. Thank you.